Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside ESG, where we'll be engaging with leaders in sustainability space. This series aims to provide a clear view into the ever-changing landscape of sustainability practices, with a particular focus on challenges and opportunities businesses face as they integrate sustainability practices in their operations. I'm Doron, the Marketing Director for Seven Environmental, an ESG reporting solution focusing on AI-driven data collection and sustainable supply chain. Today, I'm excited to welcome Bailey Church. Hi, Bailey.
Hello, Doron. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm tremendous, thank you.
Great to have you with us.
A real honor.
So Bailey is partner accounting advisory services for KPMG Canada. Bailey is the national leader for KPMG's public sector accounting advisory service line, advising entities on complex financial management, accounting, financial reporting, and auditing matters. Bailey has worked with public sector entities across Canada in their implementation of ESG reporting. In this discussion, we'll dive with Bailey into the impact of regulations on sustainability reporting and discuss what companies should anticipate in the coming years. Hi, Bailey. Again, thanks for joining us
Hi, Doron.
today. Could you share with our audience a little about yourself and your background?
I'd be happy to. Uh, so, in addition to my role, and really through my role at KPMG with our public sector accounting advisory services, I've done a lot of work around the broad environmental reporting area, and it's evolved so much over the last 10, 15 years, uh, to where when I first started, I was focused on contaminated sites and land. We were dealing with a lot of old abandoned mines and old manufacturing sites that many governments all across Canada had inherited responsibility for. Yet we didn't have these consistently on the books. So a lot of the work when we started was around how do we capture and measure these liabilities.
Right.
And from there, it's built out into everything from nuclear decommissioning and how we record those obligations and fund those obligations, asset retirement obligations and hazardous materials, and now ultimately to what we call ESG reporting and everything linked with that. So it's been a great journey.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. That is a great journey. It's always when you talk about people in the environment space, it's always where did you start your journey, and the stories are amazing, and I love your background. So thanks for sharing that with us. Let's dive into our first question. So January 2025 is really around the corner. Can you walk us through the current environmental and sustainability regulation ecosystem, specifically in Canada? What policies are in place, and what should companies prepare for in the near future?
Sure. It's very much a mixed space across Canada, and it's a fast evolving space. So I'm glad, Doron, that you dated this because we can listen to this in February 2025, and it may already be outdated. So if we look at where we are today in terms of who is required to do sustainability reporting, it's actually a very small subset of Canadian entities. Uh, we had a budget 2021 announcement that initially mandated ESG reporting for federal crown corporations. So those commercially oriented entities owned by federal government, like the Post Office and Export Development Canada, they were mandated to report under the Task Force on Climate financial disclosures uh, broadly by 2024. So we had that direction for federal crowns. We also had in a subsequent budget announcement a extension of those reporting requirements to certain federally regulated entities, financial institutions, pension plans, insurance companies, and others. Now that's where it's broadly stopped. And we've had a lot of movement in terms of uh, of publicly listed companies. Certainly, there are a number in Canada who are listed uh, abroad in Europe, in the US. But in Canada, the Canadian Securities Administrators has not yet come out with a firm direction. They've released uh, drafts and opinions, but we don't have a formal direction yet that is compelling publicly listed companies in Canada on Canadian stock exchanges to do environmental reporting. We know it's coming, but as of today, it's not out yet. We also have broad regulations from the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, impacting again the banks and that sector. So it's shifting. And what's been interesting, Doron, is just over the last month, of course, we've had an announced direction from the government of Canada to look at amendments to the Canadian Business Corporations Act to expand out reporting requirements around ESG to what they term large enterprises.
Okay.
This isn't defined. This is still going through conversation, and expressed desire to also expand out ESG reporting across the provinces and the territories. So it's in the nascent stages. A lot is developing and changing. It's a really exciting time to be in the space.
Wow, that's interesting. As you see, other countries also in different stages and moving from public sector and moving into different enterprises. Thanks for laying that out for us. On that note, as talk about things also outside of Canada, what do you think is the impact of the upcoming EU CSRD, which is coming also in January 1st, the directive on Canadian and North American companies?
It's huge, and I think the impact of CSRD. I mean, certainly the CSRD requirements and more broadly the European sustainability reporting standards are so much more rigorous than what we currently have today, even from the International Sustainability Standards Board. And we look more broadly at other areas and topics that the European standards are exploring. We have a much broader requirement and much different needs for sustainability information that's really changing the game for reporting. In North America, of course, companies who are subsidiaries of those in the European Union or companies that have subsidiaries over in the EU need to look at the requirements of this to see if they do need to do formalized reporting. And even again, those companies who are doing any level of reporting in North America today they're going to need additional data and additional information to meet the CSRD requirements. It's not one-to-one. So you can't look at it and say, well, I'm doing reporting in Canada under TCFD.
Yeah.
It's the same game to meet the CSRD requirements. Very, very different, much more extensive. So I think that understanding of scope and whether a company is caught in those requirements, the best thing I could say is to really look at that, and certainly those. I'm hoping those who know they are affected are working on it. But if you have questions, if you have any operations in the EU, my best advice is talk to an advisor and get a handle on this fast because it's coming very, very quickly. It takes a lot of work to get there, as you know, Doron.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen overnight, and the time needs to go into it. The other aspect, I would say, what I'll call the indirect aspect, and we're seeing this both from a broad CSRD perspective, but more broadly around sustainability reporting. But it's that supply chain effect, and companies that are in the supply chain of those who are required to meet the reporting requirements. So therefore, they have to provide information, even though they themselves might not be compelled to do the CSRD reporting. They're now having to provide information on carbon footprint, on water usage, on biodiversity. And these are all things that they weren't previously required to do. So I think that's also going to be a game changer if your supply chain touches those companies impacted by CSRD, you're going to have an indirect impact for sure.
Thanks. That's actually very helpful, and I think as what you said about the speed needed here, if you are impacted with the subsidiary or otherwise, it's move fast. I think that's a good advice. Thanks for sharing that. On that and the need for data comes my next question is, in your opinion, what kind of resources and technologies will companies need to adapt to comply with the new regulations? And how do you think AI comes into play here?
So I think AI is going to be a key enabler of ESG reporting and just a broader sustainability initiatives. The aspect people often forget about here is sustainability is requiring new data, new information that a lot of companies don't have today. If you think about an analogy to our financial statements, companies have been preparing financial statements since the dawn of time. We've got decades of experience preparing traditional financial statements. We know how to capture financial information. We know how to categorize it in our general ledgers. We know how to report it. We've got firm rules and processes and controls. We're entering into a whole different phase now. And it's an important analogy because the one thing the sustainability standards are doing is elevating sustainability reporting to the same level as financial statements, which means there's the same level expectation and level of rigor, control, and quality that we're going to have around this data. And jump forward now to where we are 2025, and we don't have complete data sets. We don't have all the correct data capture points to enable us to understand many of these elements that we're reporting on, whether it's our carbon footprint or others. We need additional data points to enable fulsome reporting. Maybe we don't need it on day one. I think there's a lot we can do with existing information just to get started. But certainly when we start getting out to metrics and targets and monitoring of progress, to me, that becomes absolutely critical. And we've got data sets, a lot of good data sets out there. I'm always amazed how much is publicly available. There's a lot of data sets that we can grasp that can inform that reporting. So I think some is understanding what tools are out there, what data sets are available through subscription or otherwise, and leveraging available systems and AI tools to help us, especially with that aspect of scenario analysis and doing some of the more complex monitoring projections. That's where this gets very subjective. There's it's going to be critical that we have those tools there to help us meet the requirements.
That's very helpful, and I think we'll have to see how this evolves in terms of AI tools, and we've just seen the beginning of it. I mean, as most AI applications we see are I think still kind of basic to what we'll probably see soon as modules evolve. But I think they were critical, as you said, about the analytics part of it and forecast. Just need to see about the subjective part. I think that's we'll have to keep our eyes open to that.
That's where it gets extremely interesting, and I think just understanding the broad capabilities of these tools and also understanding we've got to have the rigor behind the reporting and the analysis we're doing. If we look at a lot of the legislation that we have here in Canada, for example, around anti-greenwashing, Bill C-59, and the requirements that this puts on companies to have rigor behind their data, verifiable information in accordance with the exact wording, I believe, is an internationally recognized standard of practice, which means you can't do this on the back of a napkin.
Oh.
You've got to have appropriate rigor and support behind it. I've been so excited by the various tools I've seen through my practice, and there's so many out there in the market that I'm excited by the potential, but companies have to really look at what fits their needs, and I think that's where the time has to be invested.
That's very interesting. And interesting that you mentioned the anti-greenwashing legislation in Canada. I think they were one of the first, or maybe even the first, one of the first at least worldwide. And I've seen European companies follow, and there were already a few interesting cases there I've seen the past year. I think that's also impacting reporting to some extent, as companies know there's more responsibility and accountability, I would say, around that.
It really imposes, I think, a need to take an additional thought and make sure that what you're putting out there really has some rigor behind it. That we've got some verifiable information. What I hope doesn't happen, and I think again, it's because the proof will be in the pudding as this ultimately rolls out, is that it doesn't become something that's going to cause people to pause and not put out disclosures, to say, oh, I don't want to be caught into this legislation, so I'm just not going to disclose. That to me would be the wrong place to end up.
No, I agree. And especially from my point of view as a marketeer, and I think there's just more challenges to it and needs to be more, well, not just honesty, but it obviously doesn't have to go to that place of, just stopping, but it's more about the accountability, which makes it more interesting and moves in. It just shows also, just like reporting, it's not just about the burden of reporting, it's about seizing the opportunity, I would say, to some extent.
Absolutely. Taking the opportunity. And I think also the word I use all the time with my clients, the term I use is building the practice. Like we can't wait until you have to do it. And you shouldn't be only starting to do it when you've got to do external reporting.
Right.
It's like running a marathon and just going out and running it. You've got to practice and train and put the work in. So I think there's a lot that should be done internally just to build up to that build up the processes, get better data, skill your finance teams. Those are all the pieces that can be done in the background, and so I don't want us to lose sight of that because there's so much value to that capacity building work.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would like to move also to one of your expertise, focusing specifically on the public sector. How do you see the new standards impacting public sector entities and organizations specifically?
There's a lot of good work happening in the public sector today. And I think if we looked at, I mentioned the Crown corporations who are reporting under Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures. We have a number of leading municipalities, City of Toronto, City of Ottawa, City of Mississauga, Vancouver, all come to mind, Montreal. There's reporting there from the perspective of Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures, some reference to GRI reporting.
Right.
The issue is it's not widespread enough and it's not consistent. You have some who are incorporating a lens of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. Some are not.
Right.
And I think we have a real mix of practice. So right now we've got just as of October 31st, the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board issued an exposure draft on the first in the world public sector climate standard.
Okay.
Taking what's out there from the International Sustainability Standards Board and putting a public sector lens on it.
Mhm.
It's really exciting because the biggest obstacle I heard from my clients over a long period of time was the standards that are out there, even TCFD, are built for investors.
Right.
They're built for companies with a commercial, profit-oriented objective.
Mhm.
And that's not us. We're here to make sure the roads are cleared,
Yeah.
people are safe, the water's clean. You know, we're doing uh, public interest work, protecting society. How does this fit? So this now brings a specific lens to that to say, yes, you've got your own operations in the public sector, but you've also got a very important public policy setting and regulatory role impacting climate that needs to be factored into what you report. So what I guess what we're waiting to see now in Canada is how the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Board will bring this into Canada. So the standards from IPSASB need to be finalized, and then the Canadian Public Sector Board will be at work at how this migrates over. And I think that will then impact the speed of adoption here in this country. But I fully expect over the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see a lot of movement. Those who are already reporting, I think, are just going to keep on going and then work to transition over once we get those standards set.
Thanks for that. Interesting times for the public sector for sure. This is
It's never
it's
boring.
it's it is that they have their own set of challenges. And you put it out really well. So we're getting close to the end of our discussion, and we can't. I don't think we can go around the recent news. So following U.S. elections, many are wondering what kind of changes we might see in sustainability reporting on a global scale. What are your expectations on the influence of the U.S. policy on local and international sustainability standards? Obviously, it's we can all, it's from your experience and how you see it. Any impact or any views there?
It, I think the whole world is watching to see
Yeah.
where this develops, and because none of us have a perfect lens onto what will happen after January with the change in government. I believe we are going collectively as a world towards sustainability uh, issues, sustainability reporting. The issues aren't going to change. The issues aren't going to go away. There's a question, I think, of speed. There's a question of prioritization.
Right.
But uh, with any government in the world, that will change with political colors. But there's no question in my mind, we are going there. We have to go there. And I think we have to remember for for U.S. companies, particularly, if they are doing any level of market activity in the EU, if they
Yes.
are doing market activity in China, if they're doing activity in Canada, the impact of the foreign jurisdiction requirements will affect them. So, regardless of U.S. policy, there's going to be that broad international trade impact that will affect them. So we're not going to get away from that. I think again, it's just a question of that speed on the journey, but the journey is not changing in my mind.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think I'll probably use again what you just said at the beginning. The issues are not going away. That's I think that's key. Um, and that's key, and a good perspective, I think, for all of us. I actually, while we're talking, it's although we are getting close to the end, I'm kind of, if we can do one bonus question, I would say.
I'd welcome it.
I'd love to ask from your perspective, as you're seeing a lot of clients within the ESG and consulting to them, how do you show them or how do you talk to them about the opportunities we talked about before, not about this is not just a reporting burden and so on, but how do you kind of, well, in my shoes, how do you market the opportunity here, or what are the opportunities you kind of mentioned? So, getting companies more a goodwill to take part in reporting. Some of who are not in the reporting scope or don't need to do it yet, or as you said, you tell them to start early. What are the incentives? What are the drivers you mentioned? Kind of for the
It's a
greater community.
fantastic question,
Yeah.
Doron, and I'm a firm believer in not doing work just for the sake of doing work. Just like I'm a firm believer in not reporting for the sake of reporting.
Right.
So the drivers to me are matters of uh, better decisions, more efficient and effective operations. Uh, I think there's I think there's a really exciting transformation opportunity here for companies and public sector organizations who want to take it. It is an investment upfront, but the return on that investment is so significant. And I think if you look at getting past those first 2 3 years of investment to build up the data, to build up the reporting, to do the monitoring, yeah, that there's a cost to that for sure. But you are making much more streamlined decisions. You're able to organize your operations in a more efficient and effective manner. And all this leads to cost savings. So if we were talking about any topic other than sustainability, if I told you you've got to spend $1 million this year to get back $5 million uh, over the next 10, it would be a
Right.
no-brainer. And I do believe that's the environment we're in. I think that's what we're talking about. I think there is a clear return there from efficiency of operation, from reliability of mandate. If I'm talking to a public sector client,
Right.
if I'm talking to anybody from a city or from province, I always say, how do we know we're going to be able to deliver services to everybody in our community on a consistent basis? Well, we've got flooding, climate change, forest fires. Uh, it's key to the whole question of climate resiliency. So these are themes that I think when we get away from reporting, because reporting sounds
Yeah.
really compliance oriented, it's
Yeah.
not just compliance and reporting, but it's really about resiliency. It's about transformation. And I believe the future proofing the relevance of your organization.
Oh, that's those are great driving. I think more more people in the field should adopt them and talk about that side of what we do. Again, it's about the opportunity. That's and the drivers you mentioned, and cost usually gets attention. So that's that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
Bailey, I really enjoyed this. This has been a great
Likewise.
conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights. To the audience, if anyone has further questions for Bailey, feel free to contact him directly on LinkedIn or go to the KPMG Canada website for more information. Any last words, Bailey, for before we wrap up?
Big thanks for including me on your podcast, Doron. And I just say I hope this is the first of many conversations, not just for us, but really for the world on sustainability reporting and sustainability initiatives. I'm so excited for the potential that this brings. I firmly believe this is where we have to go as a society,
Right.
and I'm excited to see how things evolve.
Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and for the conversation. Um, And for the audience out there, thank you everyone for watching today. If you have any questions for Seven Environmental, feel free to send us an email to hello@sevenenvironmental.com or reach out to us on LinkedIn or X. Feel free to subscribe to Seven Environmental's YouTube channel for more episodes of Inside ESG. Thanks again for everyone, and thank you, Bailey. We'll see you
Thank
all
you.
next time. Thank you so much.